It is noon, and I would like to welcome you to the hidden cost of gold, how the products we use every day are contributing to the destruction of the places that we value the most. I'm Alex Dagan, CEO and co-founder of Conservation X Labs and the former chief scientist of USAID, as well as a former U.S. diplomat and a conservationist. I'll be co-hosting the session today along with Dr. Barbara Martinez, who I am really honored to work with. And I'll be introducing her in 1 second. So as some of you guys may know, around the world, today is Battery Day. Elon Musk intends to make a dramatic assertion that the newest Teslas are going to achieve cost parity similar to combustion vehicles, and he hopes to do so through the elimination of cobalt. Electric cars today are seen as a critical solution for climate change. And we just saw an article in the New York Times that said climate disruption is locked in, which makes this even more important. But these cars have some inadvertent effects. And you might guess where this is going. Up to today, cobalt has been a critical mineral for their battery. It has been called the blood diamond of batteries. And that's because it's mined in a way that's endangered child workers and wrecked the environment in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, not always through formalized mining, but through something called artisanal scale mining. Industrial mining, as we know, uses heavy machinery, advanced techniques. It is subject to regulation sometimes and oversight mechanisms, and requires significant capital and investments, and can be influenced by institutional investors globally, by the press, by governments. Although historically a dirty business, the bright light of social stigma and regulation has had impacts on company actions, on stock prices, insurance premiums, even profitability. Artisanal scale mining and small scale mining tends to be less organized. It is conducted by small informal groups of people, uses more rudimentary extraction processes with less mechanization, less capital investment, more labor-intensive practices, and may be informal, if not illegal, and can occur in protected areas and without permits. These practices can profoundly exploit resources without regard for environmental or human health impacts. But yet for 40 to 100 million people across 80 countries, it is a pathway, and frequently the only pathway, out of extreme poverty. So it's not an easy situation. And in fact, if you are watching this, which I think you have to be, on a phone, on a tablet, on a laptop computer, you're holding an assembly of molded plastics and mined minerals such as gold, tin, tantalum, tungsten, and cobalt. Many of us consumers think neither about where our products came from or how they were made, but we should. These materials, such as gold, form the foundation of our technology-dependent society. And as global demand for those electronics, including the raw materials that are necessary to make them, increase and grow exponentially due to our appetite for consumer electronics and jewelry, we will see increased demand and increased mining, including increased artisanal scale mining. But we don't really understand, I think most of us don't understand, how some of the most advanced technologies are produced from raw materials using these methods, these less formal methods, by some of the poorest people on the land. And because it can be illegal or informal, ASM may be required to use some of the same supply chains that engage in trafficking in persons, trafficking in weapons, trafficking in wildlife, trafficking in drugs. Today's event is focused on one type of artisanal scale mining, that of artisanal scale gold mining. And we have an illustrious and spectacular set of experts to speak about this issue. The Amazon is a hot spot in SGM, but this artisanal scale gold mining is not limited to the Amazon. But the Amazon is the location for one of the largest modern gold rushes of our time. And to extract gold from river sediments, miners must cut down the rainforest, liquefy the underlying soil with high pressure hoses and use things like mercury to help extract and amalgamate the gold. I had a chance working with Luis Fernandez to witness this firsthand in the La Pampa mining region in Madre de Dios, Peru, a year ago, one of the most biodiverse rainforests on our planet. Here, 25,000 miners cleared 15,000 hectares, a little over 28,000 football fields, a primary Amazonian rainforest of which Luis described of 200-foot trees that harbored elusive jaguars and tapirs, scarlet macaws, and spider monkeys. The situation in Peru isn't unique. Political instability in Venezuela, the opening of the FARC territories in Colombia, the policies of Brazilian President Bolsonaro have opened up new tracts of pristine forests to these destructive practices. And rising gold prices as economies sink, triggered by global political instability, have driven up this deforestation in the Amazon, in Africa, and in Asia. Our demand for electronics and mineral resources have tied us to these practices and the environmental and human destruction and consequences that they cause. But we need a solution that works for the people out there, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Co-hosting the session with me is Dr. Barbara Martinez, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce her. I have known her for something like 19 years at this point, and have worked with her in Madagascar. She is the Open Innovation Director for Conservation X Labs. She leads competitions at the organization, including our Artisanal Mining Grand Challenge and the forthcoming Microfiber Innovation Challenge, and previously the Blue Economy Challenge to re-engineer aquaculture. There's actually many more, but we only have 45 minutes or so today. Prior to Conservation X Labs, she was a Science Policy Fellow in the Office of the Science Advisor at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. She holds a PhD in conservation biology, and she used to study primate behavior and seed dispersal. Barbara, welcome. It's great to have you on this, co-hosting with me.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for the kind introduction. So again, those of you who joined recently, welcome to the panel. It's the Hidden Cost of Gold. We have an excellent group today. I'm going to go through some brief introductions of our panelists, and then we're going to play a video that's about 12 minutes long to introduce the topic on artisanal and small-scale gold mining in the Amazon. And then after the video, we will reconvene with the panel discussion for the remaining time. So our first panelist here is Luis Fernandez. He is the Executive Director of Wake Forest University's Center for Amazonian Scientific Innovation, CINSIA, which is a research initiative that examines the impacts of artisanal gold mining, mercury contamination, and deforestation on natural and human ecosystems in the Peruvian Amazon. Luis is also a research associate professor in the Department of Biology and a fellow at Wake Forest University's Center for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability. He is trained as a tropical ecologist. He's an expert on the environmental impacts of artisanal scale mining on tropical landscapes, and particularly on the effects of mercury contamination on wildlife and indigenous communities. Welcome, Luis. Next we have Enrique Ortiz. Enrique is a tropical ecologist trained at Princeton University. He was born and raised in Peru. Enrique is perhaps better known for his activism and leadership in Latin America on the conservation of biodiversity and ecosystems. He is co-founder and board member of the Amazon Conservation Association and other innovative and American NGOs. For over 2 decades, he has worked for private philanthropy foundations. He is currently the Senior Programs Director of the Andes Amazon Fund. And Enrique, if I'm correct, today you are wearing your Amazon Conservation Association hat in this panel. Welcome. And finally, we have Paula Diaz. She is the director with the Responsible Mining and Energy team at Conservation International. In this capacity at CI, Paula acts as a principal advisor and key relationship manager, leading a portfolio of high-profile, multi-divisional mining and energy industry partnerships. Paula serves as technical lead and advisor, in particular for the Americas field division on the application of mining and energy, environmental and social standards and best practices, the design of innovative conservation investments towards sustainable landscapes and seascapes, and the identification of sector opportunities for adopting natural climate solutions. Welcome, Paula. So first, we're going to play a video through Hopin here. Again, it's about 12 minutes. We're going to put a link to this video as well in the chat. Panelists, we'll go on mute while this is playing and then come back afterwards and have our discussion.
This is gold. It's in our jewelry, our phone, and our computer. But where did it come from? Hi, I'm Amy. I'm part of a company called Conservation X Labs, and we're working to end the 6th mass extinction using technology, open innovation, and by empowering solvers to tackle the world's hardest problems. We do this by leading competitions or challenges to find and support innovative solutions to wicked conservation problems. This time, the focus is on artisanal mining. I set out on a journey to see how artisanal gold mining is impacting the Amazon. To understand the problem, see a few of the new solutions, and find out what more is needed. It all begins in Madre de Dios, Peru. We arrived in December 2019 and made the journey to La Pampa. It's known for being one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, and also a hotspot for artisanal gold mining. The military guards the entrance to the ravaged landscape now. Conservation X Labs works with global partners to identify points of leverage where new innovation could result in exponential impact. So we joined one of our partners, the Center for Amazonian Scientific Innovation, or CINSIA, as they are doing work that shows what is possible.
We've been driving through what seems like a dune field, a desert, with at most lots of grasses, in the worst case, just sand dunes. And this was a primary rainforest a little more than a year ago.
What we do here in the drone is to fly these areas because we want to have a baseline of La Pampa. We are collecting per flight around 1,500 pictures. That's a lot of data. So one man, scanning all these photos takes a long time. So for that, we are planning to use deep learning algorithms to detect objects like the machinery miners are using. So we want to do that to see where is the mining active.
Tracking this destruction brings valuable insights.
We like to use these to develop models that forecast where threats will be in the near, mid, and long-term futures, so we don't react. That there are some kind of like, okay, in these areas, this looks like it will be under threat in a few months. So you can perhaps interrupt that. And you don't wait till it's destroyed to do something about it. So something that's preventative, you're using your resources much more effectively. There's a lot of potential because we're just scratching the surface of what to do with this. There's a lot more work that has to be done to be able to use these sorts of tools effectively for tropical conservation.
Artisanal miners often use mercury, a toxic chemical, to extract gold.
Approximately 30% of the landscape gets converted from forests to these kinds of mining ponds. And that means that you have a whole new novel ecosystem much of the question that we have is, what are these new water bodies? What's in them? How did they get there? Are they contaminated by mercury? Does fish that come from this lake represent a threat to people that eat that fish? Is there any contamination existing for the wildlife that grows up here? So we do rapid assessments of the biodiversity. We do chemical studies to see what the pH is and other important measurements to see if they're functional ecosystems. But also we do a lot of contaminant studies, especially around mercury.
We're collecting samples. All the samples that they collect, we analyze it in the lab. The higher you go in the food chain, the higher you have mercury concentrations. And we are top predator, so when we eat contaminated fish, that can harm also human beings, right? And also other animals that eat fish. We are in the middle of the Amazon. We need the Amazon for the planet, right? So I think working in this kind of environment is challenging, but it's very rewarding. For us also, it's important to produce information here and teach the local people that live here, so they also can have the capacity to produce information. And that is very important because their future depends on them. And if we show them and we teach them the capacity to do the right decision, to produce information, to do science, they can do better choices.
Measuring and monitoring the impacts of artisanal mining is important, but it isn't enough. Next, we joined another partner on the challenge, Pure Earth, to visit a mining site that was doing things a little bit differently. Pure Earth is working hand in hand with local miners. This land is being remediated and restored, and miners like Pedro Infante are using mercury-free mining techniques.
This is a mining concession. It's like a model how all the miners that they work in the same condition, how they can restore his piece of land. And we create some kind of model of how the miners or many actors can restore this kind of degradation, but it's very, very specific degradation. You can see the ponds, the little mountains of rocks, and this kind of soil, very, very poor soil. But I think that right now we have to take advantage of the possibility to work with miners.
Remediation and restoration bring new challenges.
It's hard to see basically one place after another destroyed. Having just going to areas and whether you use drones or use satellites or you go in a pickup truck to a destroyed area, you're essentially just seeing the corpse. And that's important, but it's hard. And again, I'm tired of being a mortician. I want to be in the resurrection business. Right now we are in the Reforestation tree nursery that we've established on the edges of the mining area in Madre de Dios. So why do we need a nursery? It's because we need trees to be able to plant in areas that we want to reforest because they've been destroyed by artisanal gold mining. We introduced new technology using computer-controlled irrigation systems and an a new technology for using much smaller tubes instead of these big plastic bags, we can upgrade your production from 5,000 plants a year to 100,000 plants a year in the same space. So we have 25 species that are native species of trees that are critical for bringing back native rainforests. If you're going to reforest 100,000 hectares of deforested land, you need to have a lot of trees. But in this area, we can produce that because we can do 100,000 plants every 4 months and increase the probability that these plants will germinate, survive this very critical phase, and grow up to be robust enough that when we plant them in the harsh conditions of the mining zone, that they will survive and grow up to be the new forest. When I look around here, I don't see rows of little trees. I see a forest that is 200 feet high with animals, birds, rodents, insects, butterflies.
I was sent to the Peruvian Amazon to see firsthand some of the amazing work in progress. At Conservation X Labs, we're working to take it to the next level. In 2019, we launched the Artisanal Mining Grand Challenge to bring these barren mining fields to solvers across the world, awarding $750,000 to solutions for artisanal mining. Engineers, entrepreneurs, and makers from across the globe answered the call.
We hear about the fires, we hear about the agricultural deforestation that happens, but artisanal scaled mining is a much less known problem, which is part of the reason for the Grand Challenges. Grand Challenges allow us to focus communities, raise awareness, and find new solutions from adjacent spaces around where we are.
We do this because a grand challenge can help diversify the solutions. How? Mostly by diversifying the solvers. You've heard this said time and again, it's not just the technologists that already work on mining necessarily. It's probably somebody in an adjacent space. It might be someone you know, might be a friend, might be a family, might be your barista that has a brand new idea. There might be the opportunity to change these sorts of things because we can bring people together to collaborate.
Nearly 100 innovative new solutions have been submitted to the Artisanal Mining Challenge. They build on the work already being done on the ground in the Amazon and will leverage a coalition of global partners like WWF, the Moore Foundation, CI, Microsoft, and more. Our demand for mined resources is growing quickly, but will it come at the cost of our planet? With Conservation X Labs, you can use your talent to reignite hope for the future.
Thank you. So again, if you would like to view that video again, the YouTube link is in the chat function on the side. So that was produced by our by Conservation X Labs innovation storyteller Amy Richards, and she was also the narrator. And Luis, you were featured in this film, and so I will turn to you with the first question. Really, I think the film it shows some striking images of the impacts of artisanal and small-scale gold mining impacts on the environment as well as human health. Particularly in the La Pampa region of Peru. It also highlights some of the research that your team is working on, as well as partners at Pure Earth research and approaches to restore the damage that has occurred. And so I'm wondering here, the first question is really, Luis, how are people connected to artisanal and small-scale gold mining? And why should they care? Why should they care about this this issue?
Thanks for the question, Barbara.
Well, it kind of depends on the people that you're talking about. People are connected at different parts of the production cycle and the value chain. On the ground, where our team is right now, locked down in Madre de Dios, people in Madre de Dios are mainly producers. This is a state that is generally pristine forest, but over the last 40 years, it's been one of the centers of artisanal gold production in the Amazon. So this is an economy mainly based on gold production, and it pays the bills. It attracts people from other parts of Peru and other adjacent countries. It's close to the triple border with Brazil and Bolivia, and it provides a tremendous amount of value to bring people out of poverty. That comes at an environmental cost, which we've seen in the video, but people are also connected at other parts of the value chain. So as gold leaves the site where it's produced, it then travels to larger cities like Cusco or Peru, or Lima in Peru, or in other capital cities, where traders are then part of the equation, refiners and people that convert the raw material into something that becomes the global commodity that provides a tremendous amount of value until it essentially gets to the consumers. And those are people that have more means in capital cities and elsewhere. And of course, this is a globally traded commodity, so it travels to places like Europe, China, Japan, and the United States, and Canada, where then it gets to your mall and it becomes part of either jewelry or an industrial use that winds up perhaps like Alex had mentioned, in your cell phones and your laptop. So it is something that touches everything. So in addition to its practical uses, it has a tremendous amount of economic and monetary value and significant cultural value. Gold is one of these untouchable materials that always has a demand. From ancient cultures like the Aztecs, indigenous cultures that assigned it mystical and religious value, to the practical uses that we have here. So everyone is touched by gold.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Paula to maybe give us a bit more of a background and an overview of how Conservation International and the Planet Gold Initiative is addressing artisanal and small-scale gold mining, and particularly in the Amazon region.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share here our work at Conservation International with the mining sector, with which we have been working for over 20 years. However, it's been primarily with large-scale mining. But over the years, we came to the conclusion that artisanal scale mining is also a very important sector, important source of economic development, as we have already discussed, but also if it's not done responsibly, it can have significant negative effects on the health, social, and environmental issues in those places that we care. Therefore, it's a sector that we cannot ignore. We have to engage and we have to work with them. In Guyana, which is a country where we work and where we can still find vast intact forests, mining is actually the main source of deforestation, and it's also the country's largest source of mercury emissions. However, it also contributes significantly to the overall GDP, and is an important source of employment for many people, and is the sector that earns the largest share of foreign exchange. So again, because of all these reasons, we launched the Responsible Mining Initiative. And this initiative is encompassing two different complementary projects. One is funded by the GEF, the Global Environment Facility that you mentioned, Barbara, and the other one is supported by the Norwegian Agency for Development, or NORAD. And in trying to work with these two complementary projects, what we are trying to work at is seeing the ASM sector in a very holistic manner. So we are trying to see it from a mining project perspective, from the beginning of the mining operation to the end, but also look at the whole value chain approach and also give it a policy dimension. And we're trying to tie all of this nicely on what we're calling the sustainable landscape approach. So it's kind of a stepping back and realizing that mining is one of those economic activities in a landscape that actually there's many more interactions with other stakeholders, with other sectors. And therefore, we need to really understand what are those synergies, what are those levers, and what are those risks to really truly come to sustainable solutions. So in terms of the NORAD, it's actually called, the project is called Addressing Drivers of Deforestation. So it's mainly what are those causes, the biggest causes of deforestation from artisanal mining. And we're looking at it from the front end and back end of the project. So when the miners go and try to do their exploration or prospecting. So we are undertaking research to kind of understand what are those tools and mechanisms that they are using at the smallest scale, but also medium scale, and then understand how we can kind of improve them, enhance them in a way that they are still practical and affordable, but that actually gives more certainty on where those areas are, where there are economically and commercially viable minerals. Therefore, miners can reduce their footprint. They don't have to deforest as much. They just are more certain on where are those areas where they really are going to find those minerals that they can produce commercially and be more exact in that footprint. And then on the rehabilitation is just looking at restoration activities. We want to leverage natural restoration or reforestation because it's one of the most economical ways to do it. So doing a lot of research and using especially an on-the-ground kind of exercises and analysis to really see what are those areas that are best placed for natural regeneration and those areas where this is not taking place, for this is not regenerating. Why? There might be still some potential, pressures on other reasons. Okay, so that's the first project, and the second is Jeff. This one is, or the Planet Goal, just called. The initiative is more focused on mercury reduction and adoption of environmentally friendly approaches. So in Guyana, the ASM sector is mostly formalized, and there's national legislation. So we are not focusing on that piece, but we're focusing on those challenges, policy challenges, technology challenges to reduce mercury, but also those financial challenges that are barriers for these miners to adopt these new technologies. And through the Jeff component, we also have a platform that is more global. Actually, there are 9 countries. Guyana is one of the ones that are implementing. So we are able to share those lessons and success models with these other countries and learn from them. And I think that is also a very cool way to replicate and scale up some of these innovations. And here, our team in CI Guyana is actually participating, listening to this. So I just wanted to share that they are the ones leading all this work on the ground. So kudos to them. I'm just representing our work as an institute.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for that, the overview. And Enrique, I also we want to hear from you as well. And tell us about Amazon Conservation's efforts regarding the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector, and what it is that that team is working on in regards to this.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me first tell you that gold mining is an issue in all the Amazon, but not only in the Amazon, but it's also in other areas, so much in the Andes as well as in coastal areas. But in the Amazon, it's a big deal, and it's a big deal that is happening for many years. Today, in the times when we are concerned about deforestation, and you look at the news, fires are all over. There is a lot of violence. In environmental defenders, and also issues with COVID in the Amazon. And all these relates also to gold. So what we do in Amazon Conservation Association is try to understand the scale of the problems. And we have been working on developing a platform that identifies where gold is expanding, what levels in a real-time or close to real-time manner. And this is important for all of us to understand what is going on, but it's also important for law enforcement and also for policy. So most of our efforts are focusing in detailing where new centers of deforestation or centers where gold mining is expanding, and that we put it in a platform that is open for anybody to see it. But it also helps and complements the efforts that are being developed by others, like you heard what Luis was talking about. But all of this is a knowledge that is accumulating that we hope it will help to bring, with innovations, but also ways to control it. We can find many ways of restoring land. We can find many ways of probably developing methodologies, but also we have to control the expansion of it. And that's an effort where we are contributing to society by our platform that's called the MAP program, MAAP, that you can find in the web.
Yeah, thank you. We're getting some questions in the chat here on the side, and there, this topic is really it's tough. It's really difficult. There was a recent report published by PACT and some partners that connected the SDGs to artisanal and small-scale gold mining, and I think it's worth a read for everyone as well who are tuning in. But some of the questions here are. So ASM is a source of, it's an economic source for people in the short term, but in the Amazon, it leaves the region unlivable and the resources are exhausted. And then the question in the chat is also bringing up the point that that the miners don't typically have the means to do the reforestation or to essentially pay for the environmental restoration, or even have the means to use better equipment or to prevent some of the environmental damage. So there are a number of questions in here, but maybe we should just stop it there and turn it back to the panel about what are some of those solutions, financing mechanisms, and I think this even gets into the formalization approach too. How can we move forward? What are some of the solutions that exist and that are ideal?
And Barbara, if I can add a question for the panelists, why doesn't a ban work here, and why shouldn't we do a ban? Because I know a lot of conservationists have argued that just seems to be the simplest solution. Why hasn't that worked, or why would it work, or would it work? How do we need to think about it?
Well, I could take a quick stab at some of these questions. Well, the issue of formalization is an interesting one, and it cross cuts, which is basically bringing the ASM sector out of the shadows and into a formal economy and into compliance with environmental regulations. Before I answer that, I wanted to build on what Enrique said about working together in coalitions to provide information in a timely manner, not just for law enforcement, which is key in a lot of these areas, which are to a certain extent lawless, and because they're extremely remote, poorly governed, and are generally conflict zones, just like you would see in wartime in some cases where you have environmental defenders killed. An example was just a week and a half ago where there was somebody in Madre de Dios that was shot dead because they were opposing land speculators that were related to gold and illegal timber harvesting. But one of the barriers for action that we've seen at all levels of government, many times, and municipal, regional, and national, is the lack of robust information about the dynamics and the level of contamination. Many times there are enabling conditions. You have support from the World Bank and organizations like the GEF and the UN. There is even political will in some cases with certain governments, but there is the lack of hard data. There's a lot of stories and suppositions, but there's not enough of a kind of a justification for them to fight against the economic argument, whether it is more nefariously corruption or something like that, but all the way up to the case that people are getting a lot of value out of this, and it's helping some people come out of poverty. So it's critical to work in alliances. Cincia works very closely with the Amazon Conservation Association on issues both at the ground, but also cooperation with satellite analysis in creating these platforms. So there's transparency about what forests are being cut where. That has lowered the boundaries. Also working with governments around things like mercury, both at the local level, like having a mercury laboratory in the Amazon that can analyze samples quickly and provide that information to local stakeholders and partners, to working at the national scale with the Ministry of Environment on designing a monitoring plan for compliance with the UN Minamata Convention. So providing that technical expertise, working hand in hand with the people that need to implement it in governments and at multi-partner agencies like the UN and others can help move the needle. Getting back to the idea of formalization, it's critical for these economies to get regulated. Essentially, they are working inefficiently and destructively, very similar to the way that these systems worked, or these economic systems worked in the United States and Europe. When they were informal, when they were being developed. I live in California. I'm sitting in San Francisco. Puerto Maldonado, the capital of Madre de Dios, is essentially the San Francisco of the present day. It's a gold mining town that grew up fast, very dirty, and chaotically because of the influx of gold money that came not from the Amazon, but from the Sierra Nevada. That took a lot of time to get organized, and through regulation, now it no longer has some of the negative aspects. However, I should still say, we still can't eat fish out of the San Francisco Bay because of the mercury that was dumped into the watersheds that feed the San Francisco Bay because of mercury. So the legacy of these actions today will have repercussions for centuries. Bringing the sector into compliance allows technology, it allows capital and transparency to occur. And of course, that's easier said than done. Markets have to be connected and support these evolving economies, not just for the benefit of the local people, but also for the benefit of the national economies that have to regulate them. Because right now, gold in Madre de Dios, or in many parts of the Western Amazon, has been something that's been going on for 50 or 60 years. Yet it has only been within the last 10 years that the government has taken it on, because it was considered too big of a problem. Even though they were missing out on a lot of revenue because of lost taxation, there was essentially a cost because it became much more uncontrolled, it became larger scale, and also there was some international pressure. But the value of bringing these systems online in terms of the global economy is already happening because it's illicit. Now it's just a question of putting them in and bringing value at all points of the value chain.
Can I a few points? I think that, building on what Luis just mentioned, I do think that, at least as I shared earlier, in Guyana, artisanal mining is a very important part of the GDP of the country. And even the sector is a very important share of the global gold kind of market. So at least at CI, the approach that we have taken is that we don't want to alienate a sector, we just want to work with them. And definitely what Luis was explaining, the formalization is the first step. It's just recognize them as one sector of the economy. And informalization is gonna be different steps that need to be taken, and one is gonna be a process that is inclusive, and you include them, and they have the opportunity to participate and create those policies and regulations that are gonna be fitted for the different contexts of those different miners. Also, there's evidence that when these miners are recognized, they have better land and predictable tenure or concessions, they are more willing to adopt responsible practices because they know that there's more certainty to do so. So in the formalization is not just recognizing the sector, but also supporting them in that process for adopting those responsible practices and sustaining them. And to sustaining them in all transparency is going to be economic incentives that are going to have to play a role in it. So if you think about it, these miners are doing this because their livelihoods, in a lot of cases, is survival. It's all what they do for a living. If you are asking them, well, let's do this more responsibly, which means you need to buy new equipment that is mercury-free. You need to do all these other additional things. And yes, your health is going to improve. Yes, your environment is going to be improved. They also see something that is more practical in terms of benefits, direct benefits that they are getting. And ideally, that comes from more efficient, more production, and more profitability. And in doing all of this, we are also what we call de-risking the sector, meaning that we're making it more attractive for that access to finance, additional sources of finance that can also help the sector in making the transition to these responsible practices, but also kind of sustaining it over the long time. So when I think about this access to finance is banking, or also those downstream actors that are the ones that are buying these products. And if they are interested and find ways to support that responsible production, sourcing from them, that's also a benefit that these mines are going to feel in terms of having a more secure and permanent kind of access to sell their product. So I think that the formalization, the capacity building, and also kind of the access to finance are some of the important things that we need to address in this sector to kind of overcome some of the challenges that we faced.
I think you raised something. This is, we're at the 40th anniversary of the UN Global Compact, which is, literally this partnership, a call to companies to align strategies and operations with universal practices on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption, and take actions that advance societal goals. I could think of actually, few other topics that really fit in to what we're trying to do on the SDGs, what we're trying to do in the UN Global Compact than artisanal scale mining. To build on something you just mentioned, and maybe let me ask Enrique this question: we know that Dell and Apple and Alphabet and Tesla and Microsoft just got sued last year on cobalt mining in the DRC because of their supply chains. And these are organizations that tout their supply chains, and the environmental impact of their products, and are actively working on all of them. And just to be totally clear, Microsoft is one of the participants in the challenge that we have. So to be completely transparent about it, the question is, what can consumers do differently when it's so hard to trace gold? What should these companies be doing differently to help actually scale up that mercury-free technology, or to help create the impetus to do the restoration work?
Yeah, let me first put some numbers on the table, Alex. Probably somewhere around 50% of the gold production in the world goes into jewelry. And that's an important number to remember. Regarding industry, it varies according to where you look at. At the world level, the industry represents 10%. But interestingly, if you look at the US, in the industry, it represents something in the order of 38% or 38%, if I'm right. It's an important distinction. But the first number is that in the world scale, it is mainly jewelry. And then that is something that I guess is a problem for everybody. For any person in the street. Who doesn't have gold? Who doesn't love gold? So there is an important detail to actually pay attention in a way of how do we influence society. But the problem is very complex. If you look at the world production, probably the artisanal small-scale mining is a relatively small percentage of it. Most of it comes from big operations, like big mines. In the case of Peru, which is one of the countries where we are paying a lot of attention, it is unknown what percentage of the production of gold of Peru represents this type of gold mining. The numbers are perhaps somewhere probably around 25%, 20%. It is actually not well known. It is a challenge to actually how to differentiate the production of gold mining from the big operations, like the 80% of the country, and Peru is the number 5 in the world, if I'm right, with the production in the small scale. So I believe that part of the innovation challenges of the grand challenge is to actually come out with solutions that can help us to look at different aspects of a very complex issue. And I wanted to say one thing, and by the way, not only technological, but it's also societal. It is important for us to correlate the gold mining issues with the human rights issues, as you were saying, Alex. I mean, it is not only about the Amazon. It is about generations that are accumulating mercury and affecting health, and especially important now in the times of COVID, because it is very clearly demonstrated in a number of papers that the health of people, of course, influences your mortality in terms of pandemics. And not only that, but also is related to other diseases that are hitting populations even more than COVID. For example, dengue. Dengue is actually killing more people than COVID these days in some parts of the Amazon. I want to go back just for a second to what you were saying, Alex. The question is like bans work. And I think, it is definitely a question that deserves a bit more of thinking. In the case of Peru and Madre de Dios and La Pampa area where Ciencia is very active, the bans actually have been, the enforcement of the bans have been quite effective. In fact, reducing it up to 90%, even in COVID times, in quarantine times. So it does work. But it is clear that it is not the only solution. It has to be enforced. It is in some ways a problem that is similar to narco traffic, and because narco traffic is difficult to eradicate, you have to come with solutions, and that's what we all hope that with all our work we are bringing different approaches to the issue. So much in the technological side, so much in the enforcement, and so anyway, these are issues that we need to consider. Again, regarding to your question about the industries and Teslas and Apple and different ones, that's a hard one because they may be buying from big operations that are legal in pit mines, and how to tell apart one from the other is one that is still is a challenge for all of us.
If I can just say a couple words to build on what Enrique is saying about bans. I think that it's important to discuss what we're banning. You could ban the activity, you could ban the location of the activity in areas that are precisely restricted, like a national park or a native preserve or native community preserve. Or you can ban some of the materials in the use of it, for example, mercury. So they have different effects. What happened in Madre de Dios is that the government approved clamp down on illegal gold mining, not the activity, but basically doing it in protected areas or part of the protected area network. And that was very effective. We've seen rapid reductions, and the miners don't go back because the cost of doing business in those areas are bad. And that's part of essentially regulating the sector. It's not necessarily that the activity should be banned, but it should be specified where you can do it and where you're not. And there's a cost. Whether it's an enforcement or added cost for doing so, and that's good. The activity of artisanal mining across the world, and I've also worked in Africa where this is in Madagascar and Angola, is always going to be there. There's gold in the ground, and there is tremendous poverty driving the need for migrants to move into an area, or for local people to basically say, I'm not going to be a farmer, I'm actually going to earn 100 times more than I can earn being a farmer. in the next 4 months. So there's always that kind of demand side from the local folks. But there is a lot of discussion, at least in the mercury world, about whether or not you should ban mercury. And different countries have tried different ways of doing this. For example, Brazil and recently Ecuador banned the use of mercury. And what we've seen, and there are a lot of other examples of everything in between, that banning it outright creates black markets extremely effectively. I mean, it's basically the quickest way to have the entire operation go down under the table and for illicit capital to start providing the supply. And then you have, other illicit networks that many times are aligned or at least parallel start to join. So and the people in many of these places are arms traffickers, narco traffickers, timber and wildlife traffickers. They're the people that know how to move money, capital, and material quickly, skirting legal ways of moving goods and services. So then it makes the problem even worse. So it is a more kind of gradual, or at least a more subtle approach needs to occur, or else you could make this problem much more difficult in the future, regardless of whatever technologies you bring to bear.
That is a great point. I want to go back, and this has been an incredible discussion. I want to just go back to something that Enrique said, which I think is really important, is one of the ways to frame what is going on with mercury is in terms of planetary health. That we have actually, as a planet, as a whole of societies, have made massive gains in our longevity, in the quality of life, our morbidity and mortality rates around the world. But it is literally how we have gone about achieving those gains in our economic growth that now actually threatens to hold us back. And we're starting to see those factors interact and coexist. And we have a comment that from Vanessa that sort of reflects some of those ideas, that we could actually see a reversal of gains that we've made in global health and food security because of these issues. And mercury, the one point I don't think we've made, but mercury is the ASGM is the #1 source of mercury emissions globally. So it is bioaccumulating in our oceans, in our fish, in our rivers, and is having effects that go well beyond just the sites that we are talking about. One of the things I think that's important is we talk about that there are technologies out there that could help us solve this, but how do we ensure that those technologies are adopted? Regulation is one way, demand is another. But I want to ask this question, Barbara, you've been leading this challenge, the artisanal scale mining challenge at Conservation X Labs. Why is innovation needed here? Why the challenge? How do you address this question of adoption? What was your path to get here? Could you talk about that?
In 2 minutes, yes, I will. I will address this to wrap up the panel. Yes, so at Conservation X Labs, we really try to approach the underlying drivers of conservation issues through open innovation, through competitions, prizes, and challenges. So to wrap up this panel, I'll invite you to our upcoming Summit, Innovation Summit and Award Ceremony, the conclusion of this first round of the Artisanal Mining Grand Challenge. So we had an open call for applications to submit innovations, solutions to not just gold mining, but any resource that is extracted through artisanal and small scale sector. There are a number of solutions that could apply to gold mining. What is evident from the panel is that it's not just a technological solution there's not just one technological solution, it's not just a technological solution that is going to solve all of the issues associated with artisanal and small scale gold mining. But there are a number of very interesting innovations that address the use of mercury in gold mining. We heard from the panelists that there's a lack of data and information. So before this sector can even be formalized in many parts of the world, there needs to be data. We need to know where and who and when and why. Enrique touched on, and Luis both talked about some of the mapping initiatives that occur so that we can monitor where and to what extent artisanal scale mining is having in the environment. So why we did it, it was a fairly long process to get to this particular topic, but we felt like it was a good opportunity to really to bring, there are conservation organizations involved in the sector, and we just felt like it was a great opportunity to inspire innovation and award those who are doing great work in the sector and those who are new to the sector. So the link for the summit is in the chat. Please join us. It's next week, September 30th and October 1st. We have a great panel of speakers, including Jane Goodall and David Brin, as well as representatives from the UN Environmental Program. And I believe we are at time. Please join us. Thank you. Alex?
And I just want to thank Arizona State, which is the Lab is a partner with us on this challenge. We're incredibly grateful for this opportunity to talk about this issue. And we're really grateful for the partners we have on the challenge, including Amazon Conservation and Conservation International, and you guys, and Cincia, of course. So all of you are amazing partners to have, because as we know, extinction should be our only competitor. And that's what we're trying to address as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.